journey. We're on a little journey, of this, taking a dive into, harnessing the power of our differences. And last week, was seeing is relieving, try anything. And I was using the analogy from Zootopia. See, I asked the question, what do you remember? And now I'm telling you what I said. But if you, mercy, grace, justice, thank you, Marilyn. If you remember anything, and it doesn't have to be anything I said, but if you remember anything of your experience, right? If you remember anything about what you might have felt, or something that you took away, or that popped up, it doesn't have to be anything that anybody said. Just in thinking about the seeing is relieving, in the context of we're talking about change. We're talking about differences, really, the power of our differences. And rather, because sometimes in spiritual communities, we have a tendency to go, oh, there's differences, we have to get rid of that tension. And I'm a big fan of, no, we don't have to get rid of that tension. We need to face the tension. We need to harness it. We need to embrace it. We don't even need to get comfortable with the discomfort. We need to expand our resiliency and expand our capacity to hold the tension, because that tension, right, kind of where we rub up against, is creative energy. We actually want that. We creative energy. There's something wanting to be birthed. We just haven't necessarily been taught how to do that. I don't know about up north of the border, but here in the US, I can tell you that in my world, how I was raised, and pretty much everybody I know, was that conflict is bad. Not only is it bad, but we're not even going to teach you how to embrace it, how to use it, how to harness it. Because we have this narrow view of conflict, that it means being violent and destructive and beating each other up and name calling. And that's certainly one form of conflict, but there's about 8 billion other forms. That really conflict, tension, paradox, dilemma, there's a lot of words that are pointing to that tension, right? The differences. That's what conflict is ultimately, when we can disconnect from the emotional intensity, it's the differences. And so what I've been talking about, and what we've kind of been engaging with, is using those, because there's power in that. I don't want everybody the same. I don't want some kind of homogenous world. Years ago, I stopped using the term like-minded. We're a community of like-minded people. I don't want like-minded. I know what the intent of that is, but the impact that is heard, that people, that what they hear, and how unconsciously and consciously, is that to think alike. I understand that in that thinking alike, it's, I'm probably not going to want someone, not that I'm not going to want someone, this probably is not a community. If someone believes that Jesus is their Lord and Savior, which that's fine with me, it doesn't impact me at all. But this may not be the community for them. So I understand the intention of the term like-minded, but it's not helpful. It actually excludes more people than it brings in. So that's my little pot stirring for the moment, as I move on, because there might be more. So last week was seeing is relieving. And I equated it, and I used the song that's at the end of the movie, where that's Shakira sings the song. And she says, try anything, try everything, never give up. So last week was seeing is relieving, try anything. So it was just about when we notice, and I used the example of the bully, right? I used the, when someone is bullying either us or someone else, or even if we're bullying someone, or we're being disagreeable, or we're, whether we're engaging in activity or behavior that is not our shiniest self, or someone else, even our worst behavior, can we see beyond, right? Can we see beyond the behavior? Can we see them, completely, and recognize the, the behavior that's not, engaging, that behavior that really I'd rather just run away. Do I really want to be around this? This is not what I signed up for today. I need people around me that are smiling and happy. And yet, how often do we bump up against people that are difficult, right? And what I was talking about was kind of that tension that goes on when we are met with somebody in our life that might be I'll just say it could be difficult to like, whether it's in the moment or even long term. And taking a stand for justice, meaning holding ourselves and others accountable, in some capacity. Justice is not something about punishment and being punitive. Justice really means well-being, right? So taking a stand for the well-being for mine, for communal well-being. So social justice means social well-being. How are we caring for our community? But then also mercy. So I was talking about this tension between justice and mercy, right? That it's not an either or. So when we're around people that are or ourselves, not being our shiniest selves, right? There's an accountability thing. There's a hold on, wait a minute, whoa, right? The standing, taking the stand, which there's nothing wrong with that. And at the same time, can I see more completely the person? Can I see behind, the behavior? Because I think most of us, I'm going to make an assumption, and you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, that most of us believe on some level that people are inherently good, even if we don't necessarily always show up that way, but that we are that there's a goodness. We're just really wounded, right? Like, ask the question, what would it take for me to behave as that person is, right? It just sort of helps us kind of expand our image, or expand our perspective. So today, as we keep kind of going down this road, and I mentioned the song "Try Anything," and it's, seeing is relieving, because the minute that we can see a little bit more, you kind of go, at least I do, and I think most people, we kind of go, oh, got it, right? And I can let the person off the punishment hook. I can let myself off, I got to be right hook. I can just let us all off the hook. Ooh, breathe a little bit, and keep moving, right? And move into a place of connection, move into a place of understanding, into a place of healing. So today, the second part of this harnessing our differences, excuse me, moving from the seeing is relieving, now we move into seeing is changing, like, and how that seeing piece really does change. And as Cheryl said, that in that relief, then we discover that seeing is changing, and using that principle that just the act of looking at something changes it. It doesn't change the behavior necessarily, it doesn't change the experience from the past, but it changes my relationship with it. It changes how I see someone, it changes how I will respond, it changes how I use the difference that's going on, like where we're bumping up against each other. I use that for connection, I use it for our individual and collective power to define us, to empower us, to heal us, to transform the world, right? So do me a favor, and I'm going to take you through a little visualization for a moment. You can't get this. I'm going to ask some questions at the end. If you've heard this or done this, just kind of go with the flow, and excuse me, go with the flow, and kind of unhook the brain and just kind of follow what I'm saying. So if you're comfortable, close your outer eyes, or just lower your gaze onto something in front of you and just have a soft gaze on something. Take a deep breath. A big inhale, big exhale. Do that again. Whatever you have in your hands can drop. Settle into the body. Now imagine for a moment that you're late to catch a flight, and you see yourself rushing to get to the airport, whether you're on a car, public transportation, someone's driving you. So you got to tell them to go faster. No, don't take that route. Take this route. Right. You get to the airport, you run, you get, the luggage checked, you get to security, there's a really long line. You can feel your kind of anxiety is building. You finally get through just in the nick of time, rushing down the jetway. You step onto the plane, right, and the door closes behind you. Whew, and you think, okay, I made it. And as you step on and you're thinking, oh, I made it, you see the pilot steps out from the cockpit and the pilot says, hi, welcome aboard. So you go find your seat, you plunk down, get your stuff under the seat or overhead, and you breathe. And you go, okay, I'm here, I made it. Then you get to your destination. And you get your luggage, you find your transportation, you get to the hotel, you get your stuff into the hotel, all settled in. And then you think, you know what? My conference doesn't start till tomorrow. I'm going to go find a really good restaurant. So you do. You ask down at the desk, what's one of the best local restaurants? And you go there and you have the best meal you've had in a really long time. Since you have an expense account, doesn't matter what you pick your favorite foods. And then you realize while as you're eating and thinking about how wonderful this meal is and what's going to happen tomorrow at this conference, that the couple next to you is celebrating an anniversary. And you can hear the laughter, you can hear the connection, you can hear the storytelling and the candles and the sweetness. So you go to your room and you wake up the next morning ready to go to one of the biggest technology conferences in the world. And you're excited because you're going to learn some new things and make some connections. And you've heard a lot about the speaker, the CEO of one of the hottest tech startups is going to speak, and not quite sure what you're going to hear, but you're excited. So you're in your seat and you're looking at the stage and you're just waiting. And the CEO steps out on stage and begins to talk. Okay. Got a picture of all that? You can open your eyes if you want. I'm going to ask you a few questions and just think of your initial response. In your mental image, when you stepped on the plane and the pilot came out of the cockpit to say hi, was the pilot black? When you think about the restaurant and the couple next to you celebrating the anniversary, was it two men? When you sat at your technology conference waiting for the CEO of the hottest tech startup to come out and talk, did that CEO, when they walked on stage, did they look like me? My little box, me. It's okay if one or all of your answers was no. For most people, it is. But the reason I go through that, so just notice the no. Notice if there was a no. You don't have to fess up to it. It's for you to notice. But I would, just own the no, because it's, and some questions might have been no, some might be yes, but notice the no's, because it's pointing us to the sort of the stories that we walk around with already. It's not to shame or blame or you did something wrong. It's just to notice. And what we're noticing is that the brain creates images of what's familiar. The brain creates stories of what it already knows, what it's familiar with. The brain is not a fan of what's not familiar. Right? So so whatever's going on, it's going to pull the stories that we're familiar with. Right? So it's going to pull the stories so when we bump up against someone, like the bullying story, it's our brain and our body is going to pull from the stories that we're already familiar with bullies, which then it becomes for us, it behooves us to, how do I stretch that story? How do I expand that perspective, right? And see beyond. So when I say, so here's something, this is for the chat, if you have access to the chat. Um, when you hear the word story, what comes to mind? You can type something in the chat. What comes to, when you hear the word story, are there any good, the bad, and the ugly associations with that word? Fiction, my internal thinking. Fairy tales, what I'm making up, may or may not be true. You get excited. Okay, yeah. In a fit of annoyance, has anyone, okay, I'll fess up to this. Hopefully there's at least one other person. Have you, when you're in annoyed, right? You're, because someone's interpretation, opportunity to create something, yeah. Well, when we're annoyed, when I've bumped up against something and you're not doing, when you're what's wrong with me, and if you just did what I wanted, all of life would be much smoother, right? And I have some kind of little, bumping up and just a little friction. It doesn't have to be anything big. But then I leave and I'm telling someone about the interaction, and you ever hear yourself say or heard someone else go, oh, they're just, oh, there's that story again. Oh, they're so in their story, right? When in our not shiniest moments, there, yeah, Bob writes, dragging the past drama forward. We've taken the word story and really attached a lot of baggage to it, like it's not a good thing, like, oh, they're in their story again. And I've sort of I certainly have been there, and the why the seeing is changing, and what we're doing is we're looking at story. And when I can see a story, and I start to recognize there's a danger in the assumptions of the story, which is why I took you through the visualization, right? Very few people imagine that the pilot was black. It's not a shaming, blaming thing. It's an opportunity to look to the stories, the assumptions, the stereotypes that we already hold, right? Does the story have to be factual fiction? Right? Why do stories exist? Human beings, oh my God, we're master storytellers. We love a good story. I love a good story. I'm probably one of those rare people who, when someone says, ooh, I have pictures from the family vacation, or in the old days, let me pull out the slide carousel and click through the slides to show you, the pictures of family growing up and vacations and trips and kids. And, there's some people that are like, oh my God, I got to chew off my right arm to get out of here. How do I do that? Right? I'm one of those that like, great, bring out more carousels of slides, right? Bring out more like, I just really I've always really loved stories. I also recognize the danger of what's called a single story, right? When I assume, that's what makes seeing so relieving, is I'm starting to go, oh, wait, there might be some other pieces here. Because remember, the brain likes to go with what's familiar. And what it doesn't know, it fills in the holes. And it fills in the holes of what it thinks it already knows, right? So the danger of a single story is that's what creates stereotypes. The stereotype may be true. Oftentimes it's not, even if there is some truth in it, it's certainly incomplete. But our danger is, why the differences are so important, is that if we don't recognize how they create together, then we run the risk and the harm of making one story be the only story. When you think about Gandhi, he was actually a philosophical anarchist, and he did not want an established government in India. And yet that's where we wound up, right? That's kind of where he wound up. He just felt that if everyone adopted nonviolence and a good moral code, that they could be self-governing. He also was not very kind to his wife, right? So there's this more to this story. We have this single story in mind about who this man was. Have you ever been, have people ever made assumptions about you? Put that in the chat. What assumptions have people made about you? If you're willing to be brave and have access to the chat, and I'll use one. People assume assumptions about me that because I'm overweight, I'm lazy. And that's actually an assumption people have about most, if most overweight people. Um, yeah, people can assume because of your physical abilities that you're on welfare, um, or your or physical disabilities. Um, People assume. I think many women have used the term mansplaining, um, which is a way of um, at times people assume that as a woman, especially if you're in a very corporate position, explaining more of something. Um, what other assumptions have people? So Bob says big and scary. Yep. That in that visual that I did earlier when I asked about did the tech CEO that came out on stage look like me? What's interesting is that the data says that 60% of CEOs, people believe, um, 60% of CEOs in companies are at least 6 feet tall. And yet only 15% of the population is 6 feet tall. So there's a stereotype, a bias being lived out. So what else do we have? What other assumptions? Yep, people people assume I'm straight when they know I'm married. Yep. So if you're blonde, you're not worldly. That my life is always yes. So we make assumptions about people. The assumptions people have made about you. So just kind of hold that. Um, so why does it matter? Why does it matter that we know, these stories? Why does it matter that I know someone's story or more pieces of it? Because the minute that I know, yep, yeah, I'm so big I can hit a baseball really far. Yeah. When I know more, it changes how I see you. It just does. It changes how I think of you. It changes how I feel about you. It changes me wanting to connect in other ways, right? And one of the best ways to expand the story that we may hold about someone is to look at the wounds, because our wounds tell us a lot about the stories. We tell each other stories not to inform each other of data. We tell our stories to bear witness to life. We tell our stories to bear witness to death. We tell our stories to bear witness to our woundedness, to where's the soft spots that need attention. So if I've been ever been suffocated in my life, right, I have a wound around being suffocated, then what I long for is to be free, right? If I've had an experience in my life of abandonment, and there's a wound there, what I want to find is a home, right? So the minute that I know a little bit more and give space for you to tell more of your story, if I look beyond, remember, right, the bullying, if I look beyond the behavior that's so freaking annoying and disruptive and irritating to me, I know that it's coming from this place of a wound. So if I can just make a little space, right, and recognize that if they have part of their story is being abused and maybe they don't want to be touched, then I can see behind the bullying, right? I can see more. It doesn't make it right or wrong what someone's doing, what I'm doing, right? If we're wounded deeply enough, um, we forget what we know to be true about everything other than our wound. So think like for me, the if I'm really feeling the hurt, if I'm really because the first place we go in a disagreement, right? When there's differences and we bump up against the amygdala, the brain goes danger, danger, not safe, right? Because the brain goes for what's familiar. So, and the more connected I stay with that wound and know I'm not safe, and the more deeply I'm, feeling it, the more I forget that here's, 48 people, 47 people sitting in front of me that that are good people, that are willing to be with me in my ick, right? Here's 47 people potentially willing to expand and see beyond my, what sometimes people have called me arrogant and aloof. I'll use that one. Can see beyond that and be willing to see me differently, right? Um, our wound can become our entire world. So hope the next time you're around someone that's maybe you don't care for so much, that's hard to like, just pause for a moment. That's how we do this, right? The deeper the trauma, the greater our need to remember the world outside of that wound so that we can restore a sense of wonder, right? The deeper that, so the more we dislike someone's behavior, the more annoying they are, the more annoying I am, the more irritating, the more angry, the more I'm spewing out my hurt and everything onto everyone else. The more I do that, what I'm really communicating to you, when you can pause and expand and go, oh wait, there's more, the justice and mercy thing, and breathe. You help me know that there's more to the world outside of my hurt, and help me restore my sense of wonder, which includes seeing you as my savior. Right? So slowing down. So how do we do that? How do we, to move me out of a single story, to help you, to help me move beyond what I'm seeing as your single story. You are not your worst behavior. I am not my worst behavior. You're not your best behavior. I'm not my best behavior. I'm all of it. You're all of it, right? So how I make sense of the story is this conversation between me and my insides, between me and you. So it makes me part of the immune system of the world rather than a part of the disease. That's why seeing is changing. When I look at things differently, the things I look at change. I want to see you as part, and me as part of this immune system for the health of our relationship, for the health of the greater community, the health of our world. And the way we do that is just, first of all, slow down, right? Take a breath, slow down. When you're activated and you're like, oh, the minute you find yourself going, they're so annoying, whether it's a person, an organization, a group of people, whatever. The minute you find yourself there, pause, slow down, breathe, try on a different view. What's going on behind? Assume that there's already differences there and look for them. All right. So I've been on my little soapbox a little too long. So let's go into meditation. Let's go to meditation.